In this lecture, we're going to look at strategic creativity. And what we're trying to do is take all the ideas that we've come across so far and think about them in a different approach. This is linking the idea of creativity and taking it back to organisations to see how we can use it to be successful. It's important to make a distinction between startup organisations or companies that are quite new and companies that are existing. New companies by their own nature tend to be quite creative, quite innovative, and will be quite agile in the marketplace. They all have found ways to get into the market, whether it's reducing the barriers to entry, finding new products, services, things like that. They will still have to think of some creative approaches, but the reality is they probably already have it built into their DNA. The alternative is we look at the existing organisations and thinking about how can they develop, so whether they're in decline or whether in a mature state, whether they want to think about the maturity stage, how do they go about that? So existing businesses can then use business models in a strategic way with a level of creativity to create this idea of competitive advantage. One thing that's really important to understand is actually the concept of strategy. So when we talk about strategic, it has a really important implication. The first thing is it's things that tend to be long term. So it's something that you're going to do that might take a long while to do. How long is long? Well, that depends on the industry. If it's tech industry, it won't take long. If it's a manufacturing or you make church bells, that might be very different time scale. So time is something. So strategic approaches often will take a long time. The other thing is they tend to cost a lot of money. So strategic developments always have associated costs, whether it's launching a new brand, new company, new product line, anything like that tends to have that. So we have its high cost and it takes a long time. And then the final part tends to be high risk. Strategic change, because you're fundamentally altering the way that you operate with these associated elements of long time and high cost, creates a level of risk associated with it. At the end of the day, part of the reason a CEO is paid so much money is because they're there taking these long-term strategic risks. But the failure is always there because the level of uncertainty increases the longer you look into the future, but also the more amount of money you've got to lose. So these three things have to be balanced to understand it. So when we talk about strategic in this context, we are talking about things that are high risk, take a long time, and potentially cost a lot of money. Within the business model environment that you'll be looking at for business creativity, we are looking at things that might be sitting in the industry, the market, the trends, and the macroeconomic impacts. These are all factors that have influences on your organisation, whether you are a startup or an existing organisation. If we think about industry, one of the forces that might come to bear are things like suppliers, competitors. Can people substitute for your product, your raw materials easily enough? What are the supply chain that you have? So for example, aluminium. So aluminium tends to be dug out the ground in Australia and they ship it halfway across the world to Iceland. The reason they do that is energy in Iceland is free because it's geothermic. They ship it all the way to Iceland to melt it down because melting aluminium costs a lot of money through normal means. So if you can take it somewhere and it's free, that's important. But that then creates this business model environment where your supply chain is incredibly long and that can have a big impact. The market itself, what are the demands and needs and desires of your customers or your businesses that are buying from you? Does that change often? How much does this have an impact for you? So there might be a demand up to a certain point. For example, if you are making branded merchandise for an event, as soon as that event is over, that branded merchandise is not worth anything. So how does that work? What is the segmentation you're looking at? And that's back to concepts such as the psychographic and demographic approaches to market research. So understanding these forces is really important. We then move on to things like trends. So society is in a constant change of flux, always changing, always developing. And the reality is we don't often know what these changes are until we look backwards. Our culture changes, we see things like language changes, music changes, the rise of things like K-pop becoming sort of cultural phenomenons across the Western world. In turn, we have things like regulatory approaches, how people crack down, but the European Union, America, how does that change? How does the political interest in different areas happen? And then technology, we're living through technological change, but that's always been the way, all the way back to printing press. And then the final sort of impact is the macroeconomic trends. So what's happened globally? Globalization means the marketplaces have opened, but it also means that impacts such as wars in different countries can have a huge impact on a small firm in Paisley. Where's capital? Is it foreign exchange? Capital flows around the world. What the commodities are like and what the political influences are. All of these four things can have an impact on the macroeconomic factors. So industry, market and trends and macroeconomic factors are all things that sit within your business model environment and have an impact on your organisation, that you should develop some business creativity or some strategic creativity around to try and deal with it. So we've explained what it is or what the issues are. Then what we're going to do is look at how can we deal with it. And so we're going to talk about a few business approaches, a few business models that could be used for it. So the first one is this idea of an unbundled business model. Traditionally, we've put everything together, but what the unbundled business model says is that there's different ways to extract maximum revenue and value when we look at different things. So by unbundling or taking them apart or putting them into separate slots, we can optimize each of these things being creative and therefore create multiples of revenue sources rather than doing it together. So for example, product innovation. We can see product innovation as a mechanism to drive revenue or to reduce costs by being creative. That allows us to enter new markets, consolidate our positions. It might be that you can move from second to number one in the marketplace, whatever it might be. So the first thing is you might spend some time, money and effort on being creative in product innovation. You might also then look at customer relations. How do you speak to customers? How do you engage them? What's the concept of customer lifetime value? Do we keep them updated? Do we speak to them often? Do we offer them discounts? If you are signed up to a pizza provider, they'll often send you money off vouchers. And if you've not bought from them for a while, you'll often get one on a Friday night when they know that you're probably you're most likely to buy a pizza. So that might be a different way. So again, we can extract value and create revenue from that by being creative. Finally, infrastructure, how we use our resources from an organisation. Can we use our factory differently? Can we rent it out? Can we do product development for other people? So for example, if you've got a big factory that makes cornflakes, you might make your branded cornflakes, but you might also make your cornflakes for Tesco's or something like that. So by unbundling it, you can identify different creative ways to make money or revenue for each one. Another model that's sort of grown in popularity is this concept of the long tail model. What used to happen was that sales were very much concentrated on the left hand side, and what it is the up axis is basically the number of sales and the across axis is sort of the time or the number of items. So historically, if you think about records or CDs or DVDs or downloads or whatever it might be, the most sold item or most downloaded or most streamed item will be the thing that is newest, and someone like Spotify might make a lot of money out of that. But there will be some people that like Mongolian throat singing, and so they might go onto Bandcamp and download that. Now that might only be one or two people, but if you have one or two people download 1,000 things, you can make a business out of it. So what the long tail model says is that small organisations can take the opportunity to target less profitable mainstream approaches, but by doing more of it, they can create value out of it. So long tail, especially now that things like the internet or platforms have appeared, it's an easy way to start targeting people for your Mongolian throat singing. Building on that idea, there is something called the multi-sided platform model, and I've given you an example here of Spotify, but the idea is that often the companies that make a lot of money are the ones that don't really produce anything, so they act as a marketplace effectively for other people, and that could be Amazon, that could be eBay, that could be Tesco's. You could argue that all of these are a multi-sided platform, and the concept is that they bring buyers and sellers together, and then they take a share of whatever it might be. So they can make money from both sides, or they can make money from one side, but their value is in creating that connection between the two. In this argument here, you have people that create music, and then you have people that want to listen to music. Well, that has always existed, but what Spotify has done is created a platform that makes it the easiest thing in the world to listen to music. So suddenly they have lots of people listening, which increases the demand for music, so therefore music needs to be on Spotify. So a multi-sided platform model allows someone to effectively just use a tech to pair up sellers and buyers, and take a profit from it without having too much risk at their end. Finally, the last model we're going to look at, and really sort of summing up some of the strategic creative approaches, is a freemium model. This is an approach where you offer a service for free, and often it will be a basic service with limited frills that anyone can use for free. But if people want to do something else, then you can charge them for it. And the concept around a freemium model is that by offering it for free, you get critical mass and you get a sizable user base, which demonstrates the value of your organization. And even then, if you convert some of them to premium, you make a lot of money. We are seeing that so much now in tech. We're seeing it in Facebook, in Twitter, we're seeing it in Spotify, in YouTube, all of this. We have a basic model, and then you can pay to not get adverts, or you can pay to be featured. So the freemium model has become like a very interesting creative model that over time. Interestingly, the reason it's grown is because it focuses on services rather than products. If you're selling a tin of beans, the freemium model is a bit of a challenge because, what do? Offer them more beans or offer them something else? So strategically creative, we've got these things like looking and understanding what market is, and then we've talked about 4 different models that you can do. And each of these will offer strategic direction for an organisation that they can use in a creative way to generate revenue and increase their profits.